Today we're going to be talking about a demographic transition. And a demographic transition is a theory that scientists began to develop back in the early 1900s when they saw countries transitioning from a subsistence economy to an industrialized economy with an increase in affluence and an increase in population growth. This entire timeline takes place over about 100-150 years. It's not a perfect theory, but it does allow us to make predictions as to what's going to happen with countries that are going through these types of transitions today. So let's go ahead and draw a graph and talk about the different phases of the demographic transition. So we're going to start by drawing our y-axis and our x-axis. So we'll go ahead and label those. And the y-axis is going to be birth rates and death rates. And the x-axis is going to be time. We're going to go ahead and break this up into 4 different phases. This will be phase 1, 2, 3, and 4. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. And let's go ahead and give these phases formal names. We can call this the pre-industrial. We're going to call this the transitional. Industrial. And post-industrial. Let's go ahead and take a look at phase 1. Now phase 1 is going to be marked by actually before we even do that, let's go ahead and talk about the trend lines. Right, I'm going to start by drawing the death rate trend line. And the death rate trend line is going to start out relatively high. It's going to be fairly steady throughout all of phase 1, and then it's going to drop precipitously all the way down and then stay relatively constant thereafter. That's going to be our death rate. And birth rates we'll do in green. Birth rates are going to exceed death rates by a little bit early on, and that's why we have a slowly growing population here in phase 1. And those birth rates are going to continue all through phase 2. And then again, they drop substantially and actually typically drop a little bit below the death rate. So over here you can see the death rates are exceeding the birth rates. So we've actually got a slowly declining population in phase 4. So there's our birth rates. Now, what's responsible for these various changes taking place? Well, here we have a subsistence economy. And a subsistence economy consists of mainly farmers. It's agricultural. So you got a lot of small farms. People grow up on these farms, they live on the farms, they grow enough food for themselves and their families. Sometimes they grow a little bit of extra food to sell, but not too much. We have high birth rates. And we also have high deaths. We have limited access to clean water. So let's say limited to no access to clean water, food, and health care. So I should put limited here instead of no, but we'll put no. It takes up less space. And then finally, there is no social security system. Let's go ahead and take a look at this. Small farms here is the key. Small farms require lots of labor. So the farmers are going to have lots of kids in order to work that farm. Also, because the death rate is so high, Oftentimes the families know that a certain number of their kids are going to die due to intestinal infections and such. So they have additional kids to compensate for that. There's limited access to clean water. So again, a lot of intestinal infections. Food. Sometimes we have a good crop, sometimes we don't. Is our diet nutritionally complete? Oftentimes it's not quite nutritionally complete. And then finally we have limited health care. There's just not that much health care around, and the health care that is there is very limited and sometimes ineffective. No social security system. So again, farmers are going to tend to have larger families, more kids, because as they get older, they have less capacity to work and take care of themselves. So having additional kids to help take care of them in their old age is just good insurance. Now, let's take a look at phase 2. And here you can see some big changes beginning to occur. The birth rates are going to stay relatively constant because attitudes have not shifted in that area yet. However, the death rates are coming down very quickly. So what we have here is a growing population. So that's going to be marked by a rapidly growing population. And the reason is we now have access to better food, cleaner water. We have health care, more effective health care. Vaccinations come into being. And because of this, we have a declining death rate. And all this leads to a population explosion. The larger the gap between these two, the bigger the population is going to be. And the steeper this curve, the faster the death rates begin to decline. Now, again, it takes a few generations for attitudes to change. 1 or 2 generations before people begin to say, oh, I don't need to have as many kids anymore. There's going to be less chance of my kids getting infections and dying. I have better access to health care. Their kids are going to grow up on a more nutritionally complete diet. I don't have to have as many kids anymore. Once that realization occurs, we've now entered phase 3. Phase 3 is marked by a stable population. You can see that the birth rates start to come in line with the death rates. And again, this occurs because we have changing attitudes here. Our economy is improving. Education improves dramatically. And women have more rights. There's more opportunities for women. So increased opportunities for women. For example, there's going to be increased jobs available. There's going to be increased educational opportunities for women. There's going to be increased family planning for women. And women are going to be having kids later in life. These are all going to be huge contributions, especially the increased opportunities for women. As women start to get better educations, they start to go into the workforce, they begin to have careers, and they begin to have just less time for families and for kids. Better family planning. Now they can actually plan when they want their family. And also kids later in life. The later a woman has kids in her life, the less children she's going to have, typically. Now all that is going to lead us into phase 4, where we have a slowly declining population. And that's what marks phase 4, is you have a declining population. You also have higher affluence. People have the things they need, and they actually have additional time to travel and for entertainment, things like that. You have an older population, more elderly people, less young people because the birth rates are lower and people are living longer. Because you have an older population, this begins to cause some problems sometimes if the country doesn't plan properly. Sometimes it can put a strain on the Social Security system. That is because we have less young people paying for the benefits that the older people are going to be receiving. Now, let's go over here and put some countries into these various categories. Phase 1, we're going to say no countries. But you could make an argument for a couple countries, possibly. Afghanistan and maybe another country or two that are in Africa. And this is because these countries have been torn apart by war. They were originally here in Phase 2 and they got, in a sense, pushed back to Phase 1. You could put Afghanistan in that particular category. Some countries in Africa, possibly, you could put into this category because of the growing AIDS epidemic. AIDS tend to knock out the parents. They tend to take out the parents, and the parents are the workers. They're the workforce. So if you don't have a workforce to grow food, a workforce to take care of kids, you're going to get pushed back into Phase 1. Now, Phase 2 is many developing countries. Many countries in Africa. We could put India into that category. And some people even think China belongs in Phase 2. Although China doesn't fit perfectly in Phase 2 because of its one-child policy. Anyhow, Phase 3, going to be the U.S., Canada, and we can throw Australia in there. In Phase 4, many European countries are going to fit in there. For example, Germany, Japan are going to be countries with declining populations. They're going to be affluent, and they're also going to have a much older population compared to the younger people living there. And that's going to be it for the demographic transition.